In this podcast, I had the opportunity to interview Jordan. Jordan was a cop in Colorado. She's still aspiring to be a law enforcement officer somewhere. And she talks about her trials and tribulations of one major incident that happened in her career that people look at and try to make that one incident dictate her entire life and her entire profession. She talks about how she's overcame it and how she's moving forward and the mistakes that she made. But she's very transparent about it. And I think that good or bad, one incident shouldn't define the person that you are, the professional that you are, or anything along those lines. Um, I thank Jordan for coming on and being open and transparent about the incident and just her profession in general. I think it's a very informative podcast, but you let me know what you think.
So you got to ask yourself, why do you want to do this? What keeps you motivated to stay proactive and get bad guys off the street?
The facts is a big cannon against a little tiny gun of opinions, because we've all heard people give us their opinions.
Let's talk about how easy it is to get narcotics in this country. Once they're in this country, anywhere within 2 days, the drugs will be in our cities.
Because we know knowledge is power.
Today on the podcast, we have Jordan. She was involved in an infamous incident, I guess.
Call it that.
So that's kind of why we have her on today, but we're definitely going to get down to like why she got into law enforcement, what, where she grew up and all of those good things too. But we'll definitely touch on the incident a little bit and how it impacted her on a personal level, on a professional level, how she's overcame those things and what she's doing now. But I'm very grateful that you're on the podcast today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's I've been a fan of yours for a while, like at least a couple of years, probably close to the beginning of my career. So this is a really exciting experience for me.
I don't know if you should be a fan of me, but I guess I appreciate it. I don't know.
Well, when I say a fan, I mean like when you were doing street cop training and then I think you branched away from them.
Mm-hmm.
But throughout the entire time as you've been touring around the nation, the tactics and the stuff you talk about as far as interdiction, I think is really valuable and really underrated for officers. And proactive policing is at its core what keeps people safe. Like reactive policing and just going to calls, has its place. There's no doubt about that. But to be able to recognize human behavior, suspicious behavior, and be able to intercept it before something bad happens it's a skill that not as many cops have as they should. So I really appreciated your classes. I really appreciated, all of the stuff that you've shared with the law enforcement community. And I think it's super valuable. So this was when you asked me to be on the show, it was a no-brainer.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. And I don't know how to take compliments well. So that's about all I got for you. But this is about talking about you. So let's flip this around and let's talk about you, because I feel makes me feel very uncomfortable when people talk about me. But
Okay.
I'm grateful. Thank you.
I get just as uncomfortable. So this is stepping out of my comfort zone for sure. But I also feel that the background of, everything that I went through and the story is important because I do think it can really help people. So I'm willing to embrace the suck for that and talk about it.
No, I agree. I think that, yeah, well, once we get to it, but I think that what you're doing, if someone else ever finds themselves in that type of situation, how you've been able to overcome it, I think that it will at least give someone a roadmap of a way to do it instead of going down a negative route, I guess, or a negative mindset.
Yeah, that's the hope, because when I was going through it, I was completely winging it. And I didn't have anyone to tell me, like you should do it this way, or, you should look at it from this perspective. I was, for lack of a better term, raw dogging it, and it sucked really bad. I do not want people to make the same mistakes that I made and to feel the same way that I felt. If my story can be a survival guide for someone else, then, it's absolutely worth telling.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad that you're going to, I don't know, deal with the suck right now to maybe help someone else out in the future.
For sure. Yeah. So you could start off by just whatever you want to know. Where do you want me to start?
Where do you go? So born and raised you were in Colorado originally, right?
Yeah. So I was actually born in Wyoming, but I moved to Colorado when I was like 4, and spent my entire adult life there. So, and now that I'm living in Florida, it's definitely a big change.
I can
Um,
imagine.
but I love it. I absolutely love it here.
Growing up as only child or
No,
sibling?
I've got a younger brother and I've got 2 older half sisters who I didn't get a chance to get close with until way later in life, but they're still amazing and super happy to have them. So it was me and my brother, and then my parents. And what propelled me into the direction of law enforcement was definitely my childhood. I don't want to go into too much detail, but there were some things that went on with my parents to where my family was having contact with law enforcement way more than they should have. Um, but the kind of silver lining of that is 99% of the time when I was having those contacts with law enforcement, the cops that showed up to save us were really good cops and they did a really good job. And I, as a, a little girl and as a teenage girl, I, was like, these people are superheroes. This is amazing and everything's going to be okay. And I thought that just because of them. So, as I got older and got closer to the age where I could be a cop, I really thought to myself, I really want to be the type of person that little me would have ran to for help.
With that, no, not going into the details, but I'm assuming that no one in your family was in law enforcement, but the positive interaction that you had with the child as a child with the cops that were, I guess, involved in your life at that point were mostly positive?
Yeah, they were mostly, to be honest with you, I really can't come up with a negative interaction that I had with any law enforcement officers when I was a kid. I'm sure there were some, and maybe I blocked them out, or maybe they just weren't significant enough for me to remember. But no, no one in my family was in law enforcement. Quite the opposite, actually. They were uh, people in my family. I love them to death, but everyone makes mistakes, and uh, people do things they aren't supposed to do. Good people make bad decisions. So um, there was a significant addiction problem within my household for me growing up,
Yeah.
and the person who was suffering from that addiction uh, was so unpredictable and would lash out at anyone. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel particularly targeted by that person, and I don't really know why that is. I don't speak with them anymore. They've been out of my life for a long time now. Um, but it it really it had a very lasting effect, like more than I thought it would. And the critical incident that I went through as a police officer brought a lot of that childhood trauma to light that I either blatantly ignored or just thought I was over. So the whole thing was really kind of a journey to, you know, heal things about myself that I didn't think needed healing, or just didn't want to go through the pain of healing. But going through what I went through as a police officer forced me to come face to face with some of those demons.
We'll go back to that. When you're a child, how is your dynamic in school going through these type of incidents at home? Are you a good kid? Are you kind of a troublemaker? Are you getting good grades?
I never got good grades. I I was a major jock. I was really into sports, which is a good thing. That was an outlet that I could use to stay away from the volatile home life that I had. But I didn't really focus that much on school. I just kept good enough grades to be able to stay eligible to play, and to run. I did track, and I really loved track. I hated the training, but I loved the the competition portion of it, because to me it was like, this is the most basic form of like human athleticism, is running, jumping, all of the things that, and the other thing that would come to mind would be wrestling. It's like just core human athleticism. So I took a huge liking to it and I was pretty good at it. So it really helped. And I grew up in a really small town in Western Colorado. And so not only was there, there was nothing to do other than like, you do sports or you're a total burnout, or you spend all your time in something academic. And I never really applied myself into the academics. And I didn't want to become my parent who was struggling with the substance abuse. So I really dove into sports to try and stay on the best path that I possibly could. I made mistakes, I experimented, kids do stuff like that. And I never, I always say my other parent who wasn't struggling always gave me enough rope to hang myself with. But at the end of the day, they were there for me and they supported me and they still made me, accept the consequences of my actions. But I knew that I could come to them and I could trust them. And if I made a mistake, there would be consequences, but I would be okay. So even though I had a parent who was really disconnected, really volatile towards me, really, for all intents and purposes, didn't like me, I had another parent who was extremely supportive. So it was okay.
And you said you were the oldest, right? I mean, besides your half, during
Yeah,
this time of
and
your life.
yeah, my older two sisters were adults. They're like quite a bit older than me. So they were, out of the house starting their own families when I was a teenager. And so yeah, I was the oldest. I had a younger brother, and for whatever reason, the parent who was really struggling, I think favored that my brother, but that's okay. I'm not mad about that at all. I would never want someone I love to go through what I went through. I would rather take the punishment. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it's just kind of a fact of the matter that that parent really seemed to target me and really seemed to be angry with me when I'm a child. I don't know what I did wrong. So it was confusing, but I just kind of dealt with it and just was there for my brother as best I could be, and wanted to make something of my life so that he could have a path to follow. With the with us being in a small town and really not having a whole lot of opportunities and resources, I wanted to make sure that he had as many good role models as possible. So that was another reason why law enforcement was extremely attractive to me.
What's the age difference between you and your brother?
2 years.
2?
Two. Yeah.
And when did this, did you have this your entire life, or did you notice it at a certain age, and then did it continue all the way through high school?
It was definitely present my entire life. It didn't start really negatively affecting me until I was a teenager. Um, and I'll just go ahead and say it. It was my mom. And my dad was a really hard worker, and he worked a lot. He was gone a lot because he wanted his family to have nice things and a good life. So my mom was at home, and she's got a lot of issues that there's a high possibility I'll never understand. But it just really seemed like she really enjoyed her addiction, enjoyed it more than being a parent, enjoyed it more than helping me figure out how to become a woman and how to deal with getting bullied in high school. And so as I got older and as I got more strong in my personality and independent, her and I started butting heads more and more and more. And there were plenty of times where her and I's confrontations got physical. She was constantly physical with my dad whenever he was home. And so that's why law enforcement was at my house so much, is because my mom, who was deep, deep into her addiction and really seemed to have no interest in coming out of it, was constantly trying to physically, mentally, and emotionally harm me and my father. And, my poor brother, even though he wasn't the subject of the abuse, he had to sit there and witness it. And that couldn't have been easy.
Yeah. It's interesting. You're not the only one. I mean, even with my own life, one of my parents, has currently addiction problems, and I saw that growing up. My role model growing up was my youngest uncle. He still, has addiction problems, and one of my younger siblings, battles back and forth. But it's you're not the only one that has came on here and said, like the dynamic of their home life and the positive interaction that they had with cops outside of that dynamic in their home life is what drew them to law enforcement.
Yeah.
So it's shocking the amount of people, even in military first responders, that all have a very similar dynamic where they knew right from wrong as a child, and they were seeing both sides of that fence, and that's what pushed them to be a first responder. I don't know. I think it's admirable and it's cool. Trust me, I like the lineage, the stories. I think those are very cool too. Like seeing
They
like,
are. Yeah.
like great grandpa and grandpa and, dad and now son, all of that. Like that's super cool too. But um, being able to break the chain of like either abuse or addiction or something that was very present in your life is cool because now other people can see that roadmap and use it as a tool to get out of that situation.
100%. And I think, law enforcement as a community, we're super, there's so much variance in people's life experiences. And sometimes I struggle a little bit with recruiting and hiring processes. They want these picture perfect cookie cutter cops who have never been in trouble, never been through trauma, never been, through anything difficult in their life. And then you want them to go out on the street and deal with people who are really struggling and who actually really want to harm other members of society. And I think it's so important to have police officers who not only have adequate education and training, but also have valuable life experience to, really be able to relate to their community. Because if you've got, some perfect person who had an amazing home life growing up and, got perfect scholarships and went to college and never got an MIP and, like you're, I mean, do they have a place? Absolutely. And do they have valuable experience? Absolutely. But I think there's also an underrated value in people who become cops who have been through really shitty things.
I think, and let me reword that because I'm going to throw like half the population under the bus. I think that having that experience as a youth, now you can understand and see it. So like trying to build like, if you're trying to build reasonable suspicion and you're like, well, I'm a 21-year-old cop, I'm 6 months on the job, and you go and testify like, well, I've only been on the job 6 months, but then you could, if you've seen it your whole life, you'd be like, well, my mom, my brother, my siblings all used or whatever, like someone in my family, I've been seeing it since I was 6 year old. That training and experience, you can use that now in court. Be like, no, man, I know exactly what someone that is using meth looks like because of my background. And it's not that I'm using the age of 21 and 6 months on the job is now I'm trying to articulate that. I can articulate it as an individual before I became a cop. And I think it goes a long way. As
It
well as
really,
empathy. Oh, good.
yeah, it really does go a long way. And I wish that I could say that I've met more administrators that saw the value in it. I definitely have met some, and I've gotten the pleasure of working for some, but I've also worked for people and worked with people who have no idea what the hard side of life looks like. And so to be able to enforce laws and fight crime when you don't know what you're looking for and the only experience you have is what came out of the book in the academy, that makes your job 10 times harder than it already is.
I think it's pretty evident that I'll probably be speaking at the Justice X conference, but I wanted to give my little instructor spiel like everyone else's. And the main reason is because I wanted to come in here and thank all these amazing instructors that are willing to donate their time away from their family, their profession, and their friends to come and make the profession better. I don't know how I became so lucky with the ability to surround myself with amazing people in this profession. I have some of the most amazing friends in this profession. They're the most selfless individuals willing to go out on a whim and put a conference together with me and just to try to make the profession a little bit better. And I don't know how I pulled this off. I don't know what it is, but I'm beyond grateful for them. That being said, when I speak at the conference, communication is the biggest thing to me. I think that communication is the most important tool that we have as cops, and that's not verbal communication. That could be nonverbal communication. I'm going to focus a lot of my instruction on that aspect where communication is universal. It doesn't have to just pertain to interdiction. It's all of law enforcement. If you have the ability to communicate with someone that is a multimillionaire and a guy that's homeless living on the street, your career is going to be a lot more fruitful. And you have this ability to have a lot more empathy when you're communicating and understanding and being actively listening. Someone else came up with this. I love it. So I'm going to throw it out there. As cops, we are often waiting to respond and we're not actively listening, but you can't do them both. So I think as cops, you ask a question, engage and actively watch what their response is. It doesn't have to be this such a strict format of what you're asking, chronological order or anything like that.
Let a conversation flow like you're talking to one of your friends. Don't just be so rigid. And that's where I think a lot of us fail, and it's not our fault until you know that you're doing it wrong. You'll never know. Like I was very robotic as a cop, and I couldn't communicate with people. I know that for a fact. I'm introverted, and I go to the police academy and all this other stuff. But anyways, I can't wait to see you in South Carolina in April of 2026 with all these amazing instructors.
I agree. And I think that people that have been through that are empathetic in those situations too, where, you know, as cops, we have a lot of discretion. So, you know, being empathetic, being understanding, and being able to communicate in those like high stress situations because you lived it goes a long way. Where you take someone that maybe was an only child, didn't have, you know, some type of adversity between parents, and then they're out there at 25 years old trying to tell 250-year-olds like how to calm down and relax and not be in a like a domestic situation. I just don't think I think it's very challenging for them in those situations. Whereas someone that's been through it can relate a little bit more and be empathetic and understanding and be patient and listen to them.
Yeah. And the more challenging it is, the more possibility that mistakes can be made. And that is, you know, that's a liability for everyone. It's a liability for safety. It's a liability for, you know, the viability of the case when it hits the you know, the DA's desk. It's really, I'm not saying, you know, people who don't have adverse experiences in life shouldn't try to be cops. I think if you're a good person, you have a good heart, you're doing the job for the right reasons, you should absolutely do it, because we need good cops now more than ever. What I'm saying is, I don't want to see administrators disregard people who have a background that's less than seamless. And I've seen that happen more times than not. Not you know, just with me, but, you know, with amazing people that I knew that, you know, really wanted to try and change their life and do good for the people around them. And they were completely thrown to the wayside because they had a less than perfect uh, college experience or teen experience. And it's tough. I know that transparency is important, and I know that cops are under the most minute microscope that humans can come up with right now. But at the end of the day, we're still human. And until we get Skynet going, you're going to have to deal with humans who are cops and humans that have made mistakes and have gone through really crappy things and maybe didn't handle them as well as they could have.
Nope, I'm the same way. I mean, I applied with probably 50 different departments, and at my current agency, it was the fourth time that I applied before I got hired. And a lot of that was my own doing. I got arrested when I was 22 years old, and drinking wasn't the best avenue for me. So I mean, it is what it is. You know, if you can learn from those mistakes and move on, I don't think it should be something that's held against you when you're trying to get in the profession. I completely agree with everything you're saying.
Yeah, 100%.
So after high school, did you go to college or what?
I did. After high school, I immediately went to college, and I switched around universities to try and kind of find my place, try to find a balance between staying close to my family and wanting to achieve what I could achieve. I also I made the mistake of getting married very young, and starting a family very young. And I love my child with all my heart and soul. But being a young parent and trying to figure out how to be an adult and how to do life, and then trying to go into a career as demanding as law enforcement was really difficult for me to manage. But again, that's life experience that, you know, I could bring to the table and say, I was a young mom. I had a child before I was financially and emotionally prepared to, and, you know, that gives me an avenue to connect with the community. But it was hard. It was really hard. I didn't end up going to the police academy until I was 24. So, which, looking back on it, was probably a good thing because our brains aren't fully developed till 25 anyway. I think that having cops, you know, who are 18, 19, 20, 21 years old is it's a bold move, Cotton. We're when we're young, we just don't necessarily think things through. And when you give a young person that much power, you know, it has the potential to turn bad. So I'm grateful that I got into the job when I did, because I was able to have the life experiences that I had and mature a little bit more before I put a badge on and before I realized, how heavy that responsibility is.
Yeah, I got hired when I was 25, but if I got hired when I was 21, I think it would have been a disaster for me, and I probably would not have been in law enforcement um, to even get to my pension. I think that those young 20s are I guess an interesting time, and
Yeah,
decision making's not the best, I guess.
it's not. That's just a fact of the matter. Our decision making is not great. Yeah, so when I hit 24, I went into the police academy, and then even then, I look back on on my first year of law enforcement, and I just, eesh, yeah, you cringe, like you could not pay me to go back to my first year of law enforcement. Just the ego that I had. I'm just so embarrassed by it, but it was a lesson that needed to be learned, and I'm grateful that I was able to turn the career around at that point in time. And the first year was painful, but it was necessary. So
I also think that the I don't know how your police, but I feel like the police academies kind of foster you to have that type of ego too. So if you're still molding your mind, like, and they kind of help you mold that into that egotistical type of law enforcement officer, um, yeah, it creates a pretty rough dynamic to cope
yeah,
with.
they pound it into your head that you're part of the thin blue line now, and you are the you keep away the monsters at night for other people, and it really inflates the ego for sure. And I made decisions in my first year in law enforcement that I wish I could take back and that I wish I could have done differently. But they're experiences that I learned from, and I'm grateful for that. And it's I'm just glad it's over.
When you go to college, what was your focus there? What was your major?
So when I very first went to college, I actually I changed I changed it a couple of times. When I very first enrolled in college, I was wanting to be a family counselor. My mom's addiction affected me a lot, and I knew that. And so I wanted to be able to counsel families and couples and children who were going through addiction, and try to prevent the violence that I saw. Even if I couldn't solve all of their problems, at least I could maybe keep someone from getting hurt. And then it switched to my dad has been in the oil field for 40 plus years. It's what he's done my entire life. It's why he was gone so much. And so I had always had an interest in like the science behind like oil refineries and like drilling for oil and all of those things. I was out on location with my dad, probably around the time I started walking. I was playing in frac sand, which is like not safe. So I had an interest in that. I pursued that a little bit, and then around the time that my marriage was starting to crumble, I realized like I really need to pursue the law enforcement thing. This is something I really want to do. It's really important to me. And I even entertained joining the military, and I got very close to doing that. And at the last minute, I backed out because I wanted to fast track my way into being able to be a cop. So it happened very fast. I got divorced. I tried to go into the military and then backed out at the last minute because I didn't want to be away from my son. And then I enrolled in the police academy, and just completely changed my dynamic within the span of like 6 months.
Wow, that's a lot of changes for sure. Do you think that you got married at a young age because of the family dynamic that you had? Do you think that kind of forced that hand or no?
I think I was definitely craving trying to be the mom that I missed out on. My mom's addiction didn't manifest in a really poor way, at least as far as her interactions with me, until I became a teenager. So I wanted to have a child because I wanted a family, a non-broken family. And I just married my high school sweetheart, and everything was super peachy and great, and until it wasn't. And we realized very quickly, I think I realized it before he did, that we were not supposed to be together, and that if we stayed together, I was probably going to experience more family violence. So I'm the one who ended the marriage. I'm the one who decided to leave, and I'm very grateful that I did that because if it would have stayed, it wouldn't have been bad, or it wouldn't have been good at all.
Do you think that you had the potential to get violent, based on what you saw? Like, was it, were you, I'm trying to word, were you, do you think it would be easier for you because at that time in your life, that's what you knew, I guess, a marriage and love looked like? So
No one's
having
ever
an
asked me
argument,
that. Yeah, no one's ever asked me that question. With the decisions that my ex-husband was making, I definitely had the potential to get violent towards him because he was putting us in very precarious positions financially, and he was prioritizing things that I didn't think needed to be prioritized when we had, a brand new child. And he was just making decisions that I just knew that I couldn't be around, and I knew that I needed to walk away from the situation before something happened and before I made an emotional decision. That was way before I even had an inkling that I needed to emotionally mature. It was very like scream first, ask questions later, and I look back on that and I'm like, I would never act that way now, but it was a short relationship. We only dated for not even 2 years before we got married, and then we were only married for like 2.5. So it was I just knew I needed to get out. I knew I needed to separate us. I didn't want my son growing up seeing his parents scream at each other. It's not what I wanted because that's all I knew.
how is that dynamic now with him? And then you're in Florida. Is your son with you, or do you guys split custody? How's that work?
Mm,
Or do you
it's
not want
not
to talk about it?
it's I don't think he'll ever watch this, so I don't
Okay.
really care. It's not the greatest situation. We still struggle to co-parent, which is sad to say. I I keep my mouth shut a lot. I Because I want my son to see his mom handle adversity and handle conflict with grace and patience, and to not react volatilely. His dad is younger than me, and even though he's past the age of 25, I think he has the emotional maturity of a Pop Tart. I'm sorry, it's just the fact of the matter. So no, our divorce itself was actually quite amicable. He wasn't happy that I was asking him for a divorce, but he didn't necessarily fight me on that. But we've been fighting over custody of my son forever. So it's been, my as much as I've tried to prevent it, my son has had to go back and forth between the two of us a lot, and it's a struggle. Right now, he is with his dad, and I'm hoping to resolve that situation as amicably as I can. Lawyers are expensive, so that's been difficult. And as my son gets older, he is definitely getting a lot smarter and starting to realize the differences between my household and his dad's household. And he's getting old enough to the point where he can make his own decision on who he wants to live with. So
Perfect.
the best thing that I can do now is to support my son and show him that I love him, and show him that our household here is never going to be one with conflict. There will never be fighting. There will never be breaking things. There will never be cops called. That won't happen. And he hasn't had that same experience in the time he's been with his dad. His dad has exposed him to a lot, which is very frustrating to me. And I'm very ashamed of that as well, because there were a lot of things going on between my ex-husband and the other women that he's decided to have kids with. There's multiple. And he's put my son through a lot, and that's really frustrating. But at the end of the day, I trust me and my son's relationship. We're extremely close. And he knows who I am, and he knows that everything that I do for him, and I do in his best interest. So I'm fostering a pleasant long-term relationship with my son, the only thing my ex-husband is doing right now is damaging his long-term relationship with his oldest son. So I kind of just have to let that burn. It'll do it on its own. And just, yeah, the best thing that I can do for my child is to be completely impartial and borderline emotionless when it comes to conflict with his dad, but show him all the love and affection that a mom should.
Do you do you have internal frustration since you wanted to break that cycle and not necessarily show your son, like violence or breaking or whatever on the other end's taking place? Does that frustrate you, like personally?
Yeah, absolutely. It frustrates me. This is not, what I pictured when I found out I was pregnant and when I, got married at 20 years old. This is not what I pictured for my child at all. But we don't get to choose the cards that are dealt. And I think a good measure of a human is how they handle adversity. So again, this is the type of role model that I want to be for my son, is to show him that you can handle conflict and adversity in a calm, problem solving way. And it's okay to feel your feelings. It's okay to feel frustration and sadness and, all of the negative things that come when, a family falls apart. But if you let that affect your decision making, that's where problems start. So, I'm okay with my son knowing that I'm sad and knowing that I'm frustrated with the decisions that his dad has made. But at the end of the day, I want his core belief to be that my mom will be there for me no matter what.
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, and you're also giving him a different perspective, so he gets to see both sides. And
Yeah.
now, eventually, soon here, he'll make his own decisions, and I'm sure that it would be
Yeah.
beneficial
And
towards you.
if for whatever reason he were to decide he wants to live with his dad, I'm not going to take that personally. That's another thing I want to teach him is you can't take decisions that other people make personally. That's just going to do nothing but eat you alive. So everything that his dad has done, everything that my mom did to me, any negative thing that anyone's ever done to me, a boyfriend cheated on me or something, I'm not going to take that personally, because the only thing it does is affect my happiness and my peace in life.
That's true.
So, people are going to do whatever the hell they want, but it's my choice on whether or not I'm going to let that affect my day. So I want my son to see that coping, and I want him to use it in his, as he gets older, and realize that, you can't, when people make bad decisions and when they do things that hurt you, even if they didn't do it to hurt you, you don't have to react to it.
I like it. I think that you're laying a great foundation for him to follow, and you're a great role model.
Thank you. Please
When it
stop
comes
bullying me.
when it comes to your law enforcement career, the agency that you hired with, small, big?
Which one? The
Oh,
first
okay.
one?
Yeah. Where did you go first? I didn't know how many you've been through.
Yeah, I've been through 3. The first one I went to was it was pretty small. It was about 30 guys, and it was in the town that my parents met in. So a town that I lived in for a significant amount of time when I was a younger child. My grandpa was the mayor. My aunt was like the city accountant, I think. Like, I had a long-standing family history in that city. So it seemed like a really good option at the time, when I got out of the academy, to just go there and go to a city that I knew. I already knew the geography and everything, so that was helpful. But I very quickly found out that small town politics are tough to deal with. And it didn't help that the guy I was dating at the time worked for the district attorney's office as an investigator. And something that came up was he ended up investigating the city manager for a crime, subsequently arresting said city manager while I was employed with the police department. And it turned out really bad for everyone involved except the city manager. He ended up fine. So
Was the city manager related to you in some way, shape, or fashion?
no, he wasn't related to me, but he had beef with my family.
Um,
Because my family had been in the city administration for so long. And when I got to that police department, I can't even explain to you like how many calls I went to, and people would look at my name tag and be like, "Oh, I know your dad." And I'm like, and then I met so I worked for the city police department. The sheriff's office was in the same city. The sheriff's office and the police department were right next to each other. So at some point in time, I met the sheriff. The sheriff had arrested my dad several times when they were younger, like when they were 18. And so he met me and he's like, "I know your dad." And I'm like, I know you know my dad. Can we change the subject, please?" Like, this, I'm so uncomfortable. But like, I'd show up to calls and people look at my name tag and be like, "Oh, I know this person in your family. Are you related to this person?" And I'm like, "Yes, can we focus?" It's it was interesting. It was definitely interesting. And then being a new cop, a brand new cop, not knowing anything, not knowing how to talk to people. I will never forget the first, like, during FTO when I had to make my first citizen contact. I was so scared, terrified, shaking. I did not want to contact this person. I didn't want to ask them their name and what they were doing and try to develop the reasonable suspicion. I knew what reasonable suspicion was, and I knew homeboy was doing something wrong, but I hadn't had any practice on talking to people that way. And I blew it. I
Are you
totally
are
bombed.
you introverted by nature or are you extroverted?
I think it depends on the situation. I maybe at my core I'm introverted. As my career developed, I definitely became a lot more extroverted and got a lot better at talking to people as a police officer. It took a lot of practice and it took a lot of being really uncomfy and stepping out of my comfort zone for sure. But it was a skill that I developed, and now I think I'm really great at it. I'm great at talking to complete strangers. It took practice.
Yeah, no doubt about it. How long were you at that agency? And when you started, do you have any, like, I don't know, like, specialty that you wanted to get into or anything along those lines, or were you just very content with being in patrol?
Oh, at the beginning, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my law enforcement career. I was just excited to be there. um, I was at that agency for 11 months, so it was very short. And yeah, I it was a small agency to begin with, and it was in a small county. I mean, we had, the kind of, we had like a pseudo SWAT team there's a bunch of counties that actually came together in that area. Um, and I was just happy to be there. I wasn't, gunning for any special assignments or anything like that. I was just trying to get my feet under me, to be honest with you.
After 11 months, where'd you go?
I went to the county directly east of that, to that sheriff's office, and I look back very fondly at that experience at that sheriff's office. It was extremely small. We were the only law enforcement agency in the entire county besides the troopers, and there were 7 of us. So it was extremely small, and I had no backup. So that really taught me how to talk to people and get out of my comfort zone. And if I talked myself into some, shenanigans, I better be able to talk myself out because backup's 30 minutes out and they're not even awake right now. Um, and at the time, working for a super rural sheriff's office with very, very little resources, I really had to figure out how, because it was quiet. Our call load was super low, but you never knew what could fall into your lap. A child sex assault pops up out of nowhere. Farmer John is popping off shots at his neighbor. Like, you don't know. But it was a really great experience. At the time I hated it. I look back on it now and I miss it and I loved it a lot. But at the time I hated it because I'm like, I just want to chase bad guys, but I'm chasing more cows than anything. And so many cows out calls. So many cows out calls. Every time I saw a cow, I just wanted to dispatch it. So sick of seeing cows. But I look back on it now and I'm like, I learned so much at that agency, and I had an administration that was so supportive and that believed in me and gave me every opportunity they could possibly come up with to help me excel. They're the ones who made me an SFST instructor. That's where I got my passion for DUIs. It was we had no investigators. We had no investigations team. It was 7 patrol deputies. That was it. So, all of the complex investigations, homicides, we'll call out, the DA investigators. And if we have to, we'll call out, the state agencies. But for all intents and purposes, we're it. So, I got so much great experience. And it was so nice to be able to work under people who trusted me and who believed in my abilities as a police officer. So that was a really great time. I was with them for a little over 2 years, and I loved it.
That is one thing anyone asks me, I always tell them, like, if you have great administrators and good support that back you, that's worth their weight in gold. Like, I would take, I mean, within reason. I mean, I wouldn't like take $10,000 to go, but I mean, like, if you said this agency gives you $10,000 more a year and you have a shit administration, I'll be like, nah, I'll stay at this. $10,000 for peace of mind. I'll take that all day.
I wish I would have seen what it was worth at the time, but after my experience at the first police department I worked with, I was when I very first got to that sheriff's office, I was just happy to be able to be working again. And and then as time went on and as I got more comfortable at that sheriff's office, and I realized how really slow the calls for service were, I started to get very restless. And towards the end, I was, I hate to admit it, I was on duty calling other agencies, scheduling a ride along because I was so restless. And I'm like, I can't take these freaking calls out, like cow out calls anymore. I need to do something. Like, I need to be a police officer, not a rancher.
Yeah,
And towards the end, I was really restless. And so that's what got me to Fort Lupton Police Department, which was a larger agency and significantly more busy. Like the call for service pace was just astronomical compared to what I was doing at that sheriff's office.
So what took you to that one? If you're riding around with other agencies, why'd you choose that one?
So I had a buddy of mine who he had worked in not only for the same agency that I was working for at the time, he had worked for a couple of others in the same area. And then he went to Fort Lupton PD and really quickly excelled. And he actually ended up getting in an officer involved shooting, and he got shot in the face. And when I tell you that this man got shot in the face and then walked himself to the ambulance,
Wow.
you can't, that is terrifying. That's a terrifying human that you cannot kill. And I really admired him. He was really heavy on defensive tactics, jujitsu, Gracie, which I had used multiple times while I was at that super small sheriff's office. And it saved my life a couple of times being able to fight someone because I didn't have any backup. So I really admired him and I really trusted his opinion. And he was, they were short. They needed cops, and I wanted to get out of rural Colorado. I wanted to go do, big city hood rat shit. And so that's why I went.
How long were you there for?
I was at the sheriff's office for 2 years, and then I was at Fort Lupton PD for about a year and a half.
And were you happy there up until the incident?
I was so happy. So happy. I look back on that time, and so the people that I worked with there, they're still my friends to this day. There's a couple of them that were actually on the train crash with me, and we all look back at that time. We had the perfect team. We were goony as goons could get. Like, we were doing all of the things. We were super proactive. We were heavy hitters. We were a pain in the ass to our supervisors, but at the same time, they knew that, what we were doing was good cop work. So, we were close as you could possibly get, and we had a really supportive administration. The problem is we had a supportive administration, but we had a non-supportive state government. I know a lot of places really suffered in 2020, and Colorado is one of those places that really suffered. There were so many laws that were passed that just put an absolute choke chain on law enforcement, and it made our jobs really difficult. And so that was hard, but at least we had each other. We were all super close, and we were all just embracing the suck together. And I got unbelievable training while I was there. My everyone from my FTOs to the training classes that I was able to go to, including yours, were just priceless. So I was extremely happy there up until the worst day of my life.
So were you still in patrol, I'm guessing, like when this took place?
Yeah, I was, I was just doing our normal thing. We were all working the backside of the week on nights. We were short staffed at that time, so we were working 12s. And we were used to, kind of crazy calls coming out because our call load was heavy. And, it was the area that we worked was directly in between Denver. It was north of Denver, but it was south of a city called Greeley. And Greeley is like a mini Denver. And there's pretty heavy gang activity throughout both of those places. So being in the middle of that off a major highway, we were catching, all kinds of people, and interdiction stuff was great. It worked so well for us. We got a lot of really good stuff, and it just came out as a disturbance with weapons, and we were all stoked. We're like, yeah, let's go get into it, and it turned out so much worse than any of us could have imagined.
So while you're going to that call, what's taking place in your mind? Is this a normal call? Like disturbance with weapons, not a big deal? I mean, it's a big deal, but like it's an average call, I guess.
A little above average.
Okay.
The call notes that were coming in from dispatch were they were definitely stuff that was raising our eyebrows. And the fact that we weren't automatically able to respond to the scene, and there was a decent amount of time between when the call came out and when we actually made contact with involved parties, that it was almost like an anticipation thing that kind of just upped our level of stress, I guess. And in my thought process while I was driving to the call, we were actually chasing, not pursuit chasing, but we were chasing the caller and the suspect, because the call came in, but both the caller and the suspect continued northbound out of our jurisdiction. So we thought maybe the incident itself, the crime, did occur in our jurisdiction, but we really weren't sure. The way the call came out, and where Fort Lupton is situated, it's very close to a county line. So the call could have, or the crime could have occurred in the county directly south of us. It could have occurred in the county, but out of the city jurisdiction. We weren't sure. We just knew someone had a gun. They were threatening another person with it, and we need to find that person as soon as possible before they start shooting. So, all of that information is coming in while I'm driving north, just trying to find these people. And the neighboring jurisdiction to the north of us is actually who located the suspect. And so then when I find out that he is the one who located the suspect, my role switches from investigating officer to cover officer. Because at the end of the day, there's a different officer in contact with the suspect. He's the one trying to pull them over. And so this is going to be his call until further notice.
And then go from there.
Okay. So the neighboring jurisdiction that located the suspect, the officer who called that out was a sergeant. And he tried to stop her, and she didn't stop right away. She probably drove for about 1.5 miles while he had his license irons on behind her. And she had more than enough opportunities to stop. We don't know. You could go through a whole host of what she was doing. Was she scared? Was she hiding evidence? Who knows? But eventually she did stop. And he pulled up behind her. And where she stopped was an intersection from the major highway. And then you turn east and it's on a dirt county road and it just goes to nowhere. This area in that part of the county was super rural. There was almost no artificial light. And this intersection that she stopped at was, there was just nothing there. There was no houses. It was just, 2 cornfields. And so she stops and she pulls through the intersection, drives over a set of railroad tracks, and then stops. And then with the way he stopped, and I'm not going to speak on why he did what he did. I'm just going to talk about what I know is, he pulled up right behind her and he parked his car over the railroad tracks in his own city. This was still in his city jurisdiction. So I didn't, while I'm driving there, I was maybe a minute or two out when he called out that she had finally stopped. And so I didn't even pay attention to where he was. I just knew I needed to look for the first set of red and blues I could find and get to him because he's with an armed suspect by himself. So I can't let that happen. So I got to him and I pulled up, and I fully expected when I pulled up to see him out of his car with a gun pointed at the suspect, waiting for cover. And that's not what I found. What I found was he was still sitting in his car with one leg out the door with the door open and no gun out, as far as I can tell. So, I was automatically confused. I'm like, not only are you sitting right in the target box, like, as far as I know, you're not prepared to start shooting if bullets start flying. So I'll go ahead and do that for you. So I go to his passenger side, open the door, get my gun. My gun was already out. Point my gun at the suspect, and then I knew we were waiting for one more person before we could actually start the felony stop itself. So I had a buddy from my agency pull up, and he came up behind me, and I heard him rack his rifle, so I knew he had a long gun, which was good, because the other guy who had performed the traffic stop still did not have his gun pointed at the suspect. Like, didn't want to participate in the gunfight should one unfold for whatever reason. So he's giving her commands. I got my buddy who's got his rifle out, and then come to find out the suspect is female. So he orders her to get out of the car and walks her back towards us. When we see that she's female, kind of look at my partner and say, well, you've got a rifle. He's giving commands and she's female. I'm probably going to be the one to handcuff her, which is fine. And so I handcuff her and I pull her back, and she's giving like passive resistance, nothing too crazy, but still enough to where I have to use a little bit of force to get her where I want her. And I just take her to the first cop car that I see, and which happened to be, the sergeant's car. And I had no idea he had parked on railroad tracks. And these railroad tracks were so poorly marked. There was no lights, there was no bars, there was no bells, there was nothing marking this railroad crossing other than a stop sign and a black and white reflective railroad crossing sign. And not only that, this intersection of this railroad track and this county road was at the very end of a virtually hairpin turn in the railroad tracks. So if a train's coming, you can't see it until it's way past the point of where it can stop. And so I get her back to the sergeant's car. I pat her down and I ask her, where's the gun? Is there a gun in the car? And she said, no, there's no gun in the car. And so I said, okay, patted you down. I'm going to throw you in this car real quick. They're going to clear the rest of the car, and then, we'll start searching for evidence of the felony crime. So she's sitting in the car for 1 minute and 3 seconds. And during that time, everything moved. In that 1 minute and 3 seconds, everything moved so fast, way faster than it should have. And they cleared the car, and then we started searching the car. And I just remember looking to my left and seeing nothing but like a bright light, a super bright light. And it took, by the time I realized that it was a train, the train was already colliding with the car. And it just, when you're getting that much input, your body's not reacting. And so it took me a minute to realize that's a train. I'm too close to it. I'm going to get hit. I need to run. And so I ran, and I'm thinking things are going to start flying off the car, off the train. I'm going to get smoked in the back of the head. I don't know if, one of the other police officers got hit. My partner's never going to see his son again. I'm never going to see my child again. Like, all of these things go through your head in such a short period of time. And so, the collision happens, and I'm like trying to look back and see it, but still run away and try to make sure that I'm safe. And then I just see the car all the sparks flying and the train horn blaring and the sound of the train's brakes and like twisting steel. It was so violent. It's the most violent thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And so I kind of freeze, and I realize, and in my head, I'm thinking like, Jordan, you fucking idiot. You parked your car on railroad tracks. I thought it was my car. And then the sergeant came running up to me and he's screaming, was she in there? Was she in there? And I'm like, no, she wasn't in there. Like, my car got hit, not yours. And then I look through the train is still trying to stop and trying to pass. And I look through the cars and I see my Tahoe lights, and I'm like, oh my God, yes, she was in there. And I screamed and I got on the radio and I said, we need medical emergent. The car that was hit had the suspect inside of it. And things get a little blurry from there, to be honest with you. I don't think my memory is chronologically correct. At some point in time, I moved my police car from where it was on the opposite side of the tracks behind the sergeant's car to the side of the tracks where the suspect's car was, and I wanted to point my takedown lights into the field so that medical could see what they were doing, because it was completely dark, like no light whatsoever. And so at some point in time, I moved my car, and then I run down into the field to try to get to her. And the sergeant and my other partner had got to the car before I did. And so I yelled at them and I said, is she conscious? And one of them said yes. And I'm like, how the hell is she alive? Like, that's just, it was unbelievable. It just added to the shock that I was already in. And so I go down there and they had cut the airbag away, and we couldn't open the door. The car was just too destroyed. And so we didn't know, like, does she have a back injury? Probably a neck injury. So we can't try to pull her out of the window. So we just have to sit there and wait for medical to show up. And it was just agonizing. And I'm just begging her to stay awake and to tell me her name. And she's bleeding and screaming and crying and moaning and just all of these horrible noises. And all the while, the train's still trying to stop. And I don't know how they did, but eventually they got an ambulance down there, and fire extricated her. And the sounds that she made when they pulled her out of that car is something that I will never forget. And so they get her in an ambulance, get her to the hospital, and another one of my partners shows up, someone I'm very, very close with still to this day. She's one of my best friends, and she, is asking if I'm okay, and obviously I'm not okay. I knew I had put her in that car, and I was so shocked. I had no idea we were on railroad tracks. I had no idea. And, she pulls me back up to where her patrol car is parked, and she's like, I got to take you back to the PD, and we got to get you out of here. And I'm just starting to break down at that point. And she grabs me by the side of my vest and she says, this is not your fault. And she took me back to the police department, and I dressed out. I had been told by my sergeant that I was definitely not going to stay at work that night. They were going to send me home. And but we had to wait for the investigating agency to show up. So we called Colorado State Patrol, and then we called Colorado Bureau of Investigation. And their investigators showed up and they wanted to talk to me. But at some point in time, I don't even remember when, someone told me, you need to call an attorney. So I did. And the attorney advised me, don't talk to anyone right now. You need to sleep. You need to calm down. And so the investigators show up, and I, politely declined to give a statement. And then my friend drove me home. And a couple hours later, my sergeant and one of my other partners drove my personal car back up to my house, and we're all standing in the parking lot, and I'm just still like not there, like just in so much shock. And, they told me again, this is not your fault. And I didn't sleep for about 45 hours after that. They scheduled my interview with CBI 3 days later. Even though I didn't sleep really at all before the interview, I still gave it with my counsel present. And they, completed their report. And while they were completing their report, I took about 2 weeks off after that. And then I just immediately went back to work. No counseling, no nothing. Just, I knew I was in bad shape, but I knew that I was so miserable and I was in worse shape when I was home alone with nothing but my thoughts. So I just wanted to be back with my partners. Like they're the only ones who understood what I was going through, or even had a mild understanding of what it was. So I just wanted to be back with them. So I went back to work 2 weeks later. And I worked for about 2 weeks, and then the agency administration decided they were going to pull me off the road because we as a team were getting so many death threats that they didn't think it was safe for me to work anymore. So they pulled me off the road and they stuck me in the evidence room, which was awful because let's take someone who just went through a horrifically traumatic incident and let's stick them in a cement room with nothing but crime scene evidence and, not really check on her. So it was brutal. So I did that for a little while. And then when CBI and Colorado State Patrol completed their report, they submitted it to the district attorney's office. And my attorney was told that both agencies concluded that it was just a freak accident and that no officers on scene were at fault for the victim's injuries. The district attorney politely disagreed and charged me with 2 felonies and a misdemeanor, which effectively took me off the road for good. And so I had to go through, they gave me a felony summons, which thank God, because I didn't have to go through the whole arrest warrant, getting put in handcuffs, getting booked. They were nice enough to, forego that. But I still had to go through arraignment and advisement, and I had to get fingerprinted, and I had to get my DNA taken, and I had to get my picture taken. And it was awful. It was absolutely awful. And I went to trial 11 months after the incident happened.
Were you the only one that was charged?
Yeah. I mean, no. So the guy with the rifle didn't get anything, which rightfully so, he shouldn't have. The guy who parked his car on the tracks got traffic charges.
Like a traffic ticket type
Like
things?
parking where prohibited.
Gotcha.
So not even a moving violation, which, I mean, he wasn't moving. No one was driving. It's different. It is what it is. So obviously we were planning on calling him as a witness, which, didn't happen. He pleaded the fifth and didn't have to testify in my trial. We got a bunch of really incredible expert witnesses. We got a actual a use of force expert who testified that my part that I conducted in the felony traffic stop was virtually spotless. Like I did everything by the book. Obviously there's, every agency is going to have their own tweaks to, what they do as far as procedures in felony stops. But he said the common understanding that's accepted around the nation is that I did everything that I was supposed to and that I didn't put her in the wrong car. It was reasonable for me to put her in the nearest cop car because we still had an unknown threat in her car. We didn't know if there was another person in there. We didn't know where the weapon was. So it was reasonable for me to place her in the nearest safest location, which, to my understanding was the nearest police car. It's as officers, it's our responsibility to put our equipment in a safe place. So we had that expert, and then we had another expert that testified that it was also completely reasonable that, given my experience, even though I had 4 years on at the time, I had worked previous to that agency, I had worked for 2 extremely small law enforcement agencies that didn't have a lot of felony call loads. So, I had done maybe 2 or 3 felony stops prior to that incident, and I, pulled my gun on people maybe 5 times. Like, I didn't have a lot of experience with those type of calls. So in my mind, the place where the most reasonable threat was going to come from was the suspect's car. I had no idea that a train was going to come plowing through my scene. Like, I had no reason to think that. I had no reason to think that I had to monitor another officer's placement of his equipment, especially one with 20 years of law enforcement experience, and he was a supervisor. So that's the argument that we made to the court. We elected for a bench trial as opposed to a jury trial because the main basis of the prosecution's argument was that my conduct was reckless. And Colorado defines reckless as knowingly disregarding an unknown and a known and unjustifiable risk. I can't consciously disregard a known and unjustifiable risk if I don't know the risk is present. I did not know we were on railroad tracks, so it's impossible for me to consciously disregard that risk. We thought we had a really good argument. We were concerned that a jury of just normal people weren't going to be able to understand that legal concept, so we thought we were making the right decision by presenting that argument to a judge who is an expert in the law. Looking back on it, we should have taken our chances with the jury, and I can't change it. It is what it is. But
that's kind of a rough decision, though, especially if you're getting death threats from the area and stuff. There's probably a very polarized community that, not understanding the law.
To be honest with you, the majority of the death threats were not coming from our community.
Oh, okay, never mind.
They were coming from, people over on the East Coast. They were coming from California. They were coming from Oregon. They were coming from, places that it was, it wasn't like our community they actually served, the Fort Lupton citizens. Like, there were frequent flyers of people who had frequent contact with law enforcement who had something to say about it while they were getting arrested. And of course, but I think we would have been able to explain, and I think our expert witnesses would have been very compelling to a jury. We thought they were going to be just as compelling to the judge. But, for whatever reason, the judge didn't agree, and he didn't believe that I actually didn't know that we were on railroad tracks. He thought my conduct was reckless instead of negligent. Which I will fully admit in front of God and everyone, I was negligent. I should have seen where we were. I should have looked around. I should have broken my tunnel vision and, realized what was going on and taken into consideration that, threats can come from other places. I absolutely should have done that. And it is a lesson that was horrifically learned, but learned nonetheless. But my conduct wasn't reckless. So the judge acquitted me on the felony charge, which kept me out of prison. I was facing 10 years in prison if convicted.
Damn.
Yeah. So he acquitted me on the felony charge, but he convicted me of 2 misdemeanor charges. One was assault in the 3rd degree, which is a decertifying misdemeanor for police officers in the state of Colorado. And the other one was reckless endangerment, which is like a class 2 misdemeanor. It's like a little catch-all thing. We had entertained the idea of a plea deal before trial, and I told my attorney, like, I will do jail time. I will sit in jail for however long he wants me to, 30 days. I just don't want to lose my certification. And that's really what the district attorney was going for, I think. I don't think his end goal was to put me in prison. I think he just wanted to make sure and be able to tell the person who got hit, like, hey, she's never going to be a police officer again, so you don't have to worry, and we got you justice. And my goal was to be able to be a police officer again and to overcome it and to continue to serve, because it's what I'm supposed to do. It's what I was put here for. And so when that guilty verdict was announced, it was horrendous. It was the most horrific experience of my entire life. The whole trial itself was awful. Just, I mean, not everyone gets to have the worst day of their life played on 5 different camera angles at the highest volume it can possibly go. And there were countless news outlets, reporters, cameras, you name it. Everything was in the courtroom because it made national news. I mean, we were getting calls from Good Morning America, CNN, A&E wanted to do a documentary on it. Like, it was everywhere. And then, social media, it was all over TikTok, all over Instagram and Facebook. It was just awful. So, they're playing my body cam, my dash cam, train. I didn't even know the train had a freaking camera, and they played the train camera, and that was the worst. Because that is just a god awful angle to see and I didn't know they were going to play that in the trial. And so when that happened, the judge actually had to stop the trial because I was screaming and rocking and crying at the defense table. And, he let me leave, and I went into the bathroom and threw up and just, cried harder than I've cried in my entire life, just watching that again. I didn't prepare myself for that because I didn't know it was going to happen. So that plus, the going through all of that, and then at the end of it all to get that guilty verdict, was just, my whole body went nuts. My body went into straight up fight or flight. All the feeling left every single one of my extremities. All of the blood rushed to my vital organs because my body straight up thought we were dying. I had to be carried out of that courtroom. And I asked the judge to sentence me that day because I just couldn't take, I just needed to get it over with. I couldn't take, having to go another 30 days thinking well, is he going to send me to prison? What do I have to do jail time? What am I going to, now my career is gone. So what else could you possibly take from me? And the judge didn't know any of this, but 2 weeks prior to the trial, I had attempted suicide, and it was like a full blown, police response. I barricaded myself in my apartment. A co-responder came out. It was a horrific 11 months. There was nothing good about it.
Is that because of just the stress of this and the unknown of what was going to happen in the trial? Was that the main reason, or?
It was that, and then it was also the county where all of this happened. It's a large county. It's one of the largest counties in Colorado, but the law enforcement community is really tight knit. And I had heard of a couple of members of other agencies talking about the incident and talking about it in front of my coworkers. These conversations were happening in the booking room in the jail and at the hospital and at trainings. And everyone was talking about how I was a fucking idiot and how, I never should have been a cop and I'm just the worst. And, how stupid could I possibly be? And, how stupid could my agency possibly be to hire me? And I just knew that even people who I thought were going to be able to see it from my perspective, other cops, I just felt like, everyone had completely turned on me, and I just didn't want to be here anymore. And I just said my goodbyes, and just, I felt like everyone wanted me dead. So I was just going to give them what they wanted. And, it didn't work out that way. And I'm grateful for that. I had a lot of people step up throughout that process who, saved my life in more ways than one. And, particularly the cops that showed up to my call. No one wants to be the subject of a call for service. And I was, and, the guys who showed up to my call to talk me off of the ledge did a really good job. And I'm really grateful for them. And so after the trial, or I guess I'll back up a little bit. After my suicide attempt, I was already in counseling, but it wasn't really doing anything. It was more of just like a survival thing of just, I can't kill myself today because I have an appointment with my therapist tomorrow. So, but after my suicide attempt, I had a meeting with my therapist and we decided, like you need a higher level of care. This is not working. So after trial, after the guilty verdict, it was like a week after the guilty verdict, I flew to Utah and went to inpatient treatment for 31 days. And it was a really brutal, and that whole, everything after, the train crash was brutal, but going to treatment was really hard, but it was also really good. It saved my life for sure. So I was able to come back after treatment and face the judge and the crowd and the cameras and go to my sentencing hearing and just take whatever they were going to give me. So the judge gave me 30 days of 30 months of supervised probation, so 2.5 years, 100 hours of community service, and mandatory mental health counseling. And they didn't care. They didn't count any of the counseling that I had previously done. They didn't count my inpatient treatment. They said, nope, you have to start all over and you have to do this much treatment. And then we need reports showing your progress and all of that stuff, because the court recognized that I was really fucked up from this whole thing. So they put that in their order that I needed to attend that treatment. And then they said, see you later. So
With all this, because you talked about early on in the podcast about the trauma coming back with your mom, and then did they offer you any type of healing right after, like, or any type of treatment right after, before they put you in like the evidence room or whatever?
Do you mean like the court or my agency?
Your agency. 'Cause
Yeah.
you came back for a little bit. Did they give you the opportunity to talk to like a clinician or anything?
Yeah, they did. They did. So also what came out of this was a fairly large workers' compensation claim. And so the police department that I worked for contracted with a counseling service out of like the Denver area that specifically focuses on first responders. So they got me in touch with them, and that they were super helpful. They were amazing. But like I said, the court didn't recognize any of that treatment that I had done prior to my sentence. I don't know. I honestly don't know why. So I don't remember when I stopped seeing that specific clinician, but the treatment that ended up satisfying the court mandated counseling that they wanted me to do, I actually completed down here in Florida.
Which one was the most beneficial to you when you were gone for 31 days? Did that have the most impact on you healing?
For sure. The treatment that I was going through prior to trial, but after the train crash, it was beneficial to a degree. I definitely think it, I would have been in even worse shape had I not been going through it. But at the time, it wasn't really getting me forward and helping me process the trauma at all, because all these negative things kept happening. The train crash happened and that's really awful. And now I'm getting death threats and my entire team is getting death threats. And now I'm getting pulled off the road. And now I'm getting charged with a felony. Now I'm now I'm going to trial and having to relive the trauma all over again on 5 different camera angles. Now the judges found me guilty and my career is completely gone. All of these things kept happening to where me and my counselor could not make any headway on the trauma because we just kept getting more and more and more. So what was nice about Utah was that there was no trauma that could happen there because I was completely separated from everything that was affecting me. I had no phone contact. All my family and my friends were writing me letters, my snail mail. It was, completely taking me out of the environment that was making me sick. I lived in the area that this horrific incident happened. I drove over train tracks every single day. So it was constant, re-traumatization by living in the same area that was making me sick. So going to Utah and being able to get out of that, I was able to make a little bit of headway on the trauma. I was able to get a little bit of it processed. And that's what got me to the point where I could go to my sentencing hearing and not completely fall backwards and be even more of a suicide risk.
Why do you think the final straw was you hearing other law enforcement officers say negative things about that incident? What do you think about that was the actual trigger?
To be honest with you, that it wasn't the only trigger. There were a couple of other things that happened personally, to be honest, in the relationship that I was in at the time, with the guy that I was dating. There was the train crash itself was tearing me and him apart. He didn't know how to deal with me, with what I was dealing with. And he had trauma of his own that he had never processed. And so two people who are sick cannot help each other get better. You know what I mean? And so me and him were having major issues. And then just knowing that other members of my law enforcement community thought I was a piece of shit. I called it. I just couldn't take it. I couldn't take other cops not trusting me. I think I have internalized a lot of part of the identity of being a cop is you want people to be able to trust you and you want people to be able to depend on you and that you're not going to be a liability. And to be honest with you, as a female in law enforcement, I've dealt with that a lot. I've felt at times that my male partners didn't trust me and felt like they had to babysit me because sometimes female cops don't rise to occasions as well as they should. And male cops, it happens with male cops too, but with females, people don't think that females belong in this job anyway. I'll say it. I know a lot of people who think that. And I have spent my entire career training and making myself a dependable partner. I don't want, me to attach to a call and for someone to see my call sign en route to their call and they think, oh, great, now I got to deal with her. I don't want that. I want to be an asset. I don't want to be a liability. So the fact that my entire what I felt in my head, I felt like my entire law enforcement community thought I was a complete liability and that no one trusted me. No one ever was going to want to work with me. And I took that super personal. That it broke my heart because all I've ever wanted was to, work with the team. And even though, there are times where I like working alone, but there's nothing that compares to, the camaraderie of law enforcement. And it completely broke my heart that everyone thought that I didn't belong there.
Yeah, no, I mean, I look at it and no, you're good. I look at it and I always think what that final straw is and a lot of times is the we as cops depend on these people in a life or death situation when when I don't know shots are being fired and I know this person's going to run towards shots with me or however you want to word it. And then when you're battling for your own life because of mental type of issues, and then you hear them throwing you under the bus, it's the same battle that you would anticipate those people being there. And then when they're not, you don't really have anyone to turn to. And I don't know if that's why. Like, this is just my own perspective. I could be completely off the fucking map with this. But then I also feel like that's where suicide in this prevention comes from, in this profession comes from. Also, like poor administrators and things along those lines. But I think that when you start to have your own people that you've counted on and they've counted on you, in those very hectic and trying times as cops, where you're side by side, and then when you're battling something on your own and you can't count on them, I think that it's just that double below, like where you've confided in these people and they've know so much about you and they would have been there if shots were being fired at you, but now you're dealing with this. And on the flip side of that, I don't think that individuals that aren't involved in that realize how trying that is on someone's mind, and how much stress that they're going through if they've never gone through it. So I don't know. I think it sucks, but for whatever reason, a lot of times in law enforcement, we are the biggest dicks to each other. It's like a family. Like I'll talk shit to my brother all day, but as soon as the neighbor does, that's a problem, and me and my brother are gonna go handle it. But um, I don't think we do good. We don't do a good enough job of realizing when talking shit is good and when talking shit is bad.
Yeah, I'm all for talking shit. Like my love language is definitely violence. If I'm not being mean to you, I don't like you. So I I think you have a really good point, and I've never really thought about it that way. I think what was more kind of going on in my head is I knew that I did the best I could in the situation that I was put in at the train crash. Um, I just didn't, I couldn't take knowing other cops thought that I was that poorly trained or that, stupid or, that I purposefully disregarded the railroad tracks because it just wasn't true. And um, I'd like to point out that the people in my immediate circle, like members of my department and my friends and my family, they are not the subject of what I'm talking about. They were wholeheartedly supportive. They were pounding on my front door saying, "Jordan, we are here for you, but you have to talk to us." And I had done a horrendous job of asking for help. I did not like. I don't ask for help. So still to this day, I'm terrible at it. I was completely isolating myself. I was not taking care of myself. I wasn't eating. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't taking care of myself at all. And then they would say like, "Hey, we're here for you, but you have to let us in." I would like physically lock the door and be like, "No, get the fuck away from me." Like, and so they are not the subject of what I was feeling that night. They were trying as hard as they could to be supportive, but you can't make someone accept help. They have to be ready to. Um, and then, when I looked death in the eye, literally, and that situation was so hard because the actions that I was doing, and so obviously the police got called, and in the county you can see other agencies' calls, and so there were a couple of my friends who were working that night, and so they were looking at this call for service, and they recognized my address, they recognized my name, and they're like they got a virtual front row seat to my downfall. And I feel so terrible to this day that I put them through that. When the police department that responded to my call busted through my front door. They didn't actually break it. Someone gave them the passcode. But one of the co-responder was on the phone with my best friend. She was on duty at the time, and she's listening to those police officers screaming at me, "Jordan, drop the gun. Jordan, don't do this. Let us help you." And she's on speakerphone listening to this whole thing. And I will never forgive myself for traumatizing her like that, and how close I was to pulling the trigger. And she would have heard that, and it makes me sick to think about, but it's not what happened. They saved my life that night, and I'm grateful for that. I feel terrible that I put her through that, but it just shows what kind of friend she is, that even to, she's still my friend to this day, even though I'm the one who put her in therapy. Like, she has to go to therapy now because of what she heard that night. But she's still around. She still wants to be my friend. She's still like the most amazing person that I know. So you can't put a price on friends like that.
I agree. I'm sure if you ask her, she's going to say that she'll take that over the contrary of what could have happened that night. So I think that you're putting a lot of weight on yourself, which I
Yeah, I
don't
do that a
necessarily.
lot.
Yeah, I don't think that's necessarily necessary. But I kind of understand. I understand where your mind is. I just don't think that if you ask your friend, she's going to be like, "Yeah, I think I would rather the other outcome to take place than what I heard." So
Mhm.
maybe you should lift a little of that burden off yourself and not think about it so much and think so poorly of it.
Yeah, I'm working on that.
I
So
get it.
recently I got off probation 8 months early, which is great. And that same friend that we're talking about showed up to that hearing with me. I had to fly back to Colorado for it. And the judge, I gave a statement to the court asking them to please terminate my probation early. I've completed everything the court's asked me to do. This is how I've improved my life. This is what I learned from it. This is how I'm trying to, be a better member of society. And the judge actually said, he's like, "You've got to take some of this off of your shoulders." He's like, "We are well aware that there was no ill intent by what occurred. And you've got to give yourself a little bit of grace. You can't carry the weight of this for the rest of your life." And when he said that, it really shocked me because he was so not like that during my trial and my sentencing hearing. He was very like, "I'm going to bring the hammer down on this cop and I'm going to make an example out of her." And so for him to be that human, um, to me was a nice surprise. And my friend that came with me that day, she's like, I told you you shouldn't carry this whole thing." And I don't know if I'll ever not carry the guilt of what happened that night, because as police officers, our job, the whole, like, thing of when we show up is like, we're supposed to stop whatever bad is happening. We stop it. We take control of that, and we save the day and we protect people. And I don't know, maybe I will, sit with it and come to terms with it, and maybe even try to find a little bit of peace in it. But at the end of the day, my thought to all of that will be, it was still like, no matter what she did, she still committed a felony that night. She still put a bunch of other people in danger. That's just a fact. She had her own criminal outcome from this whole thing. Um, but at the end of the day, no matter what she did, I was still supposed to protect her, and I failed to do that. And I will carry that for the rest of my life. And I think I choose to carry that because I don't ever want to lose the importance of protecting human life. Like, even if it's a, a a suspect's life, or a person in custody, or whatever. Like, we still have to protect that life. And it was my job to make sure nothing bad happened to her the minute that I put my hands on her, and something bad still happened, and I have to carry that.
I get it. I don't know how I would deal with it. I would definitely have some. I would carry that with me for a long time. There's no doubt about it. But I also look at it as it was nothing malicious. You didn't do it intentionally. So there's some, internally there's got to be some saving grace. It wasn't something that you intentionally wanted to do or anything along those lines. Mistakes were made across the board, and it it sucks to say, like, but like, you've you've battled that now, and you're moving past it. And I think that by you carrying it for the rest of your life is going to be nothing but, at some point, it'll be detrimental to you. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you're always carrying the weight of that incident, I don't know. There's nothing positive by carrying that forever that's going to come out of that.
If I can make anything positive out of it, I want it to be that, I never lose sight of, um, everyone deserves to be safe, and everyone, even people who commit crimes. And I think we will all, as police officers, inevitably fall into the kind of us versus them thing. And I am so guilty of that. I'm so guilty of it. And so if I can use that situation to keep me out of that pitfall, then I can make better decisions and make more uh, I guess just be more aware of everything that's going on in any scene that I'm possibly on. Like, I'm not perfect. I'm still gonna miss things. I know that. But this whole incident has definitely taught me that if there is ever a day I wear a badge again, hopefully, I've got to be more conscious of everything going on around me, not just the obvious threat. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I think that goes across the board. I mean, the tunnel vision thing, you didn't start the tunnel vision thing. That thing's been around forever. And there's always cops that are getting stuck in the tunnel vision aspect of life, or critical incidents or pursuits, and things are going on outside of that tunnel vision that they're not paying attention to, that has harmed them and harmed other people. So, I mean, yes, I agree. There's nothing. It's a learning moment. I think that, I think if you look at that, like, you you've learned from something that took place. It was a negative thing, and you're going to move forward, and it's never going to happen again, to you.
Not
Uh,
on my watch. No,
so,
absolutely not.
you got to, yeah, like it sucks. It's a it's a bad learning moment, but it's a learning moment, and you
Yeah.
move forward, and you hopefully one day come to grips with it and just understand, like, yes, it was a this incident is an incident in my life. Um, it's a very big incident, but it doesn't define who you are, and you've learned from that, and you moved on, and you've made better decisions
Yeah.
in general.
I don't ever want, to just be the girl from the train crash. I want to be, um, if I'm going to be known for anything, I want to be known for like resilience and like uh, a demonstration of how strong the human spirit can actually be. Um, and also a demonstration of like it's okay to not be okay. And there were so many times where I was so angry with myself that I was struggling as bad as I was, and I couldn't understand why my brain was betraying me the way it was. Like there were so many times where I thought, like, why can't you just fucking get over it? Like, just get over it. It happened. It's done. It's over with. Like, why are you letting this haunt you and steal your hours of sleep and affect you're sitting at a stoplight and a train passes a mile away, but you hear the horn and you're panicking for no reason. I was so angry with myself that that my body was having the responses that it was. And now I've really come to realize and come to peace with, like, we can't control how our bodies respond to trauma. It is physiological, it's cellular. And I've been able to realize that now, and I'm not so disappointed and angry with myself whenever I have a bad reaction or a bad day, because there are still parts of my brain that are a little broken, and it's been 3 years, and there are going to be times where I don't where I have a bad day or I don't respond to a stimuli as well as I would like to, but I've got to give myself that grace because I can't control what my brain does. And my brain is it's doing lizard things. Like, it's just doing what kept it alive 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I had an incident, 2012. Very short pursuit. Went to stop a guy. He ended up fleeing from me. I forget how fast he was going, but he had a tree like 125 miles an hour. I go up there. The car catches on fire. I'm trying to get him out. I see some very traumatic things when it comes to it. And at the time in law enforcement, it wasn't very accepted to go and be like, yo, I need help. And I tried that, and I was told some things that did not help me by any means whatsoever. But thank God I have a buddy that is a clinician. He owns his own practice, and I was like, yo, man, like, can I just talk to you? And if you think that I need to go see someone else because of the conflict of interest between you being my boy and this, just say, like, Kenny, you need to go talk to someone else. And I was like, I'll accept I'll accept that from you as being my friend. I was like, but I just think I need to talk to someone. And that's the one thing from that point on that has always helped me out in traumatic incidents is just talk. It doesn't even have to be a clinician, but like someone that you can confide in that's not going to pass judgment, that sits there and listens to you. Because me, like I would just replay this incident in my head all the time. And it started at a stoplight. So anytime I'd stop at a stoplight at night and there was a car in front of me, like all of these things, like small things. And I was like, what the and I would say the same things like get over it. Stop being a little bitch. Like these things would always come in my mind. And I'm like,
Yeah.
it didn't go away. And I didn't know the avenue. And thank God I have a good friend that helped me out. But for me, it's just talking about it, like getting it out of my brain and having a conversation with someone else. And then I'm not sitting there reliving it in my brain as much. Once I start having that conversation and I get it out, it's so much easier now. I mean, it's been what 12, 13 years where I can talk about it. But like until I talked to him, I didn't talk to anyone about it. It just replayed in my mind as a fucking horrible movie.
Yeah, definitely. I went through the exact same thing. And then the train itself was like making its way into completely unrelated parts of my life. And, I'd be like, my therapist would tell me, she's like, I want you to imagine like your favorite place, your most peaceful favorite place. And mine was a beach. That's why I moved to Florida. I love beaches. And so she would have me, just sit in her office and like try to imagine myself at a beach. And I would literally like imagine a train plowing into me and my family as I'm trying to sit on this beach and have a good day. Like it made no sense. And it would upset me so bad. And I'm like, this is never going to happen. This isn't a reasonable scenario for me to imagine. But it was still my brain playing that trick on me of like, you are in danger all the time. You can never relax. You can never calm down. This is going to haunt you for the rest of your life. And man, it took so much work to get away from that and to, for me to really like talk myself out of that I'm always in danger. And some days are better than others. Like I still struggle with it to this day of like, I will never be able to hear a train horn and not react and not have some kind of reaction. That's just the way it'll be for the rest of my life. The day that comes that I can hear a train horn and for me not to lose my breath and for me to not immediately start shaking, that's going to be a good day and I'm going to have several drinks. But until then, it's just become a part of my normal life. And I just get an icky feeling anytime I'm around trains. But it's a normal part of life. Trains are everywhere. It's a, completely normal mode of transportation. I've got to find a way to be okay with that. So I've improved a lot. I've gotten much better. I can now go over a set of railroad tracks and I can I'm definitely aware and I'm like, looking and making sure that a train's not coming and that there's no other cars parked on the tracks or anything like that. But I can go about my day and not panic and it doesn't ruin my whole day. So, even if it's 1% better, it's still better than I was yesterday.
No, I agree. I think that would be the hardest challenge for me too. Hearing a train, like I don't know, like that's
It
yeah.
sucks. I hate it.
I don't even know.
I hate it so
Well,
much. If every train could disappear off the face of the earth, I'd work for the rest of my life until I am completely old and decrepit to pay for whatever level of commerce the world is going to lose if we completely get rid of trains because I think they're stupid now. But it's a fact of life. It's a reality of life. The world is not going to stop. The trains are not going to stop just because I have an adverse reaction to them. So I just got to deal with it.
No doubt. I usually try to keep these an hour, almost to 2 hours. But few things. I wasn't going to interrupt you. I think that everyone need to hear it. So I do want to talk about your judge. I think that the judge showing some grace and some understanding, some empathy during when you're asking for a reduction in that time. I think that was very commendable, and I think more judges need to do that. I want to thank you for coming on, being vulnerable throughout this entire podcast. I think that is a very big challenge for anyone that was involved in that type of situation. But let's end a little bit on a positive note. Now, what are you doing now?
So currently down here in Florida, I work for an animal shelter. And so I get to work with dogs all day, every day, which most times I love. It's the hardest job I've ever done in my entire life. Like physically demanding, I am jacked right now. I'm because these dogs are so hard to and they're shelter dogs. They're not perfect dogs. They're not, the sit stay type of dogs. These dogs are nuts. And but I love them to death, and it's really cool to be able to see, people come into the shelter and find their new best friend. I love that part of it too. I actually took the Florida peace officer state certification test yesterday, and I passed.
Nice. Good job.
Yeah, so I'm really, really happy about that. That was a huge step. My journey to get back into law enforcement has been grueling. It has been horrendous, and it has been long and just lots of setbacks, but I'm closer now than I've ever been before. The first step was to complete all the stuff that the probation required of me. I did that. The next step was to actually get off probation. I did that. The next step was to pass all of the, Florida does, if you have law enforcement experience in a separate state, you can come into Florida and do what's called EOT. It's equivalency of training. So basically you prove to the state that you have all of this training and experience that would normally be required of someone going through a basic academy. So that was a really hard process for me because you have to demonstrate your skills in 4 high liability areas: driving, defensive tactics, first aid, and shooting. I had applied to be early termed from probation earlier this year. And because the court was so bogged down with cases, the judge I filed the motion to be able to term early, and he, instead of just approving or denying the motion, he wanted to actually do a hearing for it. But the court was so bogged down with cases, it put the hearing 3 months out. So, and while I was on probation, I wasn't allowed to possess firearms. So that set me back 3 months of, where I wanted to be. But I finally did get off probation, which allowed me to take the firearms test. I took that earlier this month, and I was so scared because I haven't been allowed to possess a firearm for 3 years, so I haven't shot a gun for 3 years. And I'm just going to go back into this test and hope for the best. I didn't get the chance to train, didn't get the chance to, shoot a gun again, and I ended up passing the firearms test.
Nice.
I did a lot better than I thought I was going to. I got a 99 on both the day and the night shoot, so I only missed 1 shot. And so I did that. And then once you do all those high liability areas, then you're able to take the state certification test, which I did. And it's pretty common, from what I've been told, it's pretty common that not everyone passes it on the first try. And I got a passing score on the first try, which was great. So I did that yesterday. And
Awesome.
Today I submitted a bunch of applications to agencies in my area. And so we will see what happens from there.
Awesome. That's all. Happy. Everyone loves a redemption story, so you have to, you have to get back into law enforcement. I think it would be great for you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
We end every podcast with one question. So,
Okay.
We Teach for Justice Academy. What is your definition of justice?
What is my definition of justice? Man, that's a tough question. I think my definition of justice is whatever occurs, whatever someone is wanting justice for. I think everyone involved should make sure that that particular situation doesn't happen again. And obviously, we only can control ourselves. We can't control decisions that other people make. But I think real justice occurs when everyone involved in a negative situation that requires justice makes positive changes so that situation never happens again. That's justice. It's not vengeance. It's not, punishment. It's what did we learn and what can we do better to make sure that this never happens again.
I like it. I figured that you'd have a different perspective than most. So I was excited to hear what you had to say about it.
No one's ever asked me that question before. I feel like that's an oral board question that I probably should get at some point. And thank God you answered it, because if I go into a bunch of oral boards over the next couple of weeks, someone asks me, now I have an answer.
Yeah, you're not the only one. Everyone, pretty much everyone, like Tom Rizzo is probably the smoothest with it, but everyone, there's like a delay and they're like that you've been like some of the some of the podcasts are lighthearted and I'm just throwing lobs and softballs to them all day, and all of a sudden they get that one, they're like, hardest question of the day. And I was like,
For
it's the
sure.
only one that I have. It's the only hard question I have. So, but I appreciate you joining me, and if you ever need anything, let me know, and then keep me posted on the outcome of what takes place.
Yeah, I definitely will. I really appreciate you, taking the time to. It's a long story. It takes forever to tell. So I'm sorry I took up so much of your time, but
Oh, not at all.
the fact that you even took the time and you think that the message is important as well gives me all the feel good feelings, because do I want to be a cop again? Yes, absolutely. I love the job. I will do it until my body completely quits. Um, but at the end of the day, I don't think I was put on this earth to be a cop. I think I was put on this earth to help people, and whatever that means. So if this is an avenue where I get to do that, I'll never turn it down.
I definitely think this is going to help a lot more people than you realize.
Okay. That makes me feel good.
Thank you. You have a good night.
You too. Thanks, Kenny.